Call the meeting to order of the Lewiston School Board for June the 27th, 2022. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. Next item on the agenda is school committee member introductions. I'll start with Ms. Parks.
Megan Parks at large.
Janet Bowden, Ward 2.
Elizabeth Eames, Ward 3.
Karen Paquette, Assistant Superintendent.
Bruce Damon, Ward 1.
Tanya Whitlow, Ward 4. Ashley Medina, Ward 5.
Megan Hurd, Ward 6.
Paul Popelant, Ward 7.
Linda Scott, City Council Representative.
Jake
Thank you.
Lakeland, Superintendent, joining you remotely.
The next item on the agenda is to receive and potentially vote on the nomination for the assistant principal position at Montello. Yes, Superintendent Langlis.
I'll start briefly and then have Karen chime in. We've had a number of very good AP candidates this year, which we're very happy about. Several internal people that really rose to the top of our candidate pools, and we're going to introduce each of them tonight. Maybe Karen could share a little information about candidates.
So I'm happy to share our nomination for the assistant principal at Montello, Allison Hopkins. She's been in the district as a teacher. She's been in the district as an instructional coach. She's also recently worked at Montello as, I don't know what your official title was, but she ran our extended day, and extended year programming, as well as worked with the RTI and MTS process at Montello. So I'll turn it over to Tiffany Demers, the interim principal at Montello.
Good evening. Something you may not know about Allison is that while her role is really focused on our RTI systems and special programs, she really went above and beyond this year to support us as administrators in the disciplinary aspect of our job, in planning professional development. She really did a lot, which is the role of assistant principal, just to help us out, just because our capacity was limited. And in that role, even when she was helping out, she would collaborate with us, get feedback on our processes, how we want to handle student situations. And every single student situation that she handled, she did so thoughtfully, without sort of responding reactively. And she really made sure that that repair of relationship happened when there was harm done. And so she really used a restorative approach, which is something we really value at Montello. And she's really equity minded, which is really aligned with our value system as a community. So I'll let her say a few words, but we're excited to have her transition into this new role, which I'm sure she'll do quite well at.
Do I go first or second? First. Hi, all. Thank you for considering my nomination for assistant principal at Montello. It's only been a year and a half, but the community that I've been able to be a part of at Montello has been like no other. So I'm just really excited to continue the work that we've started, continue as a leader, and continue to put our students first. Thank you.
And Allison, didn't you attend Montello as a student?
K through 6.
Any member have questions for? No? I would need a motion.
I'll motion that we approve the nomination for the assistant principal at Montello.
I'll second that.
We have a motion by Ms. Whitlow and second by Ms. Bowden. Any discussion? All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you.
Congratulations, Allison.
The next item on the agenda is to receive and potentially vote on the nomination for an assistant principal position at Geiger.
I'm waiting for superintendent to give me the look, but I guess he's going to let me go. I am happy to share the nomination of Michelle Dunham for assistant principal at Geiger. Michelle has also been a member of the Lewiston Public Schools community staff for a number of years. I'm sorry, I don't have your resume in front of me, but it's been several. 13, there we go. I knew it was in the teens, 13 years. She has worked as a teacher at the primary level as well as the intermediate level. She's also worked as an instructional coach as well, and has done her internship and taken on lots of other leadership roles at Farwell, and will now be transitioning to Geiger. So I'll turn it over to Cindy Gish.
Good evening. So I now have my team of Michelles here. As you know, Michelle Winslow has moved into the assistant principal special ed position. And we've been together for this year. So now we're bringing on another Michelle, and we're super excited. Her experience in both the primary and intermediate and her work as a literacy coach is really going to support our work with the TPEG process and helping teachers to really improve student reading and get kids on level. And she's done a lot of work also at Farwell with equity, and that will be able to just build on to what we've already started at Geiger. So we're super excited to have her on our team, and she's coming tomorrow, hopefully. Do you want to say something?
Hi, everyone. Just want to say I feel so fortunate to have been at Farwell for 13 years. It's bittersweet leaving, but then I'm thinking and processing and reflecting about I built relationships with 400 something students at Farwell, and now I get to tackle Geiger, and I just feel really passionate about the kids in Lewiston. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity to learn, to grow, to build relationships, and use my knowledge to support teachers and students. So thank you.
Any questions for Michelle? I would take a motion. Ms. Ames? Okay. And a second by Mr. Beauparlant. Any discussion? All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Michelle.
Item number 5 on the agenda is to receive and potentially vote on the nomination for the assistant principal at Mcmahon.
So as they're making their way to the podium, I am also excited to put forth the nomination for Mr. Jeff Ramich as the assistant principal at Mcmahon. Jeff has not been a member of the LPS community, but a neighboring community of Lisbon and a few other surrounding communities. He comes to us with some experience as well at all levels, different leadership roles that include administration in both the athletic world as well as principal and assistant principal. So I'll turn it over to Charlotte.
All right, so we're excited to welcome Jeff on board. I'll echo what Karen said about Jeff's experience. I think he brings a depth of knowledge from all the different roles that he's had in different leadership capacities, and that's really going to help balance out our team at Mcmahon. As you know, Michelle Russell, who's been a long time assistant principal at Mcmahon, she's now in the assistant principal special ed role, and I just finished my first year at principal at Mcmahon. So Jeff's going to be a great addition to help balance our team. I haven't known him very long, but in the short time that I have, I can tell like he's very passionate about education. He's going to be a great support to our students, to our families, and to our community. And he's already been such a great team player. I'm really happy to have him on our team.
Thank you, everyone, for your consideration for the job. I'm very excited. I actually feel like I'm coming home a little bit because I did my student teaching right over there at Lewiston High School back in 1989. I know some of you weren't in high school yet at those times, but so I do feel like I'm coming home a little bit. As Charlotte mentioned, I am part of the community, being from Lisbon. for close to 50 years now. So I've spent plenty of money over at Hannaford and Bork's Market. So and I'll continue doing that since we're right next door. I'll be getting that list from my wife every day. Stop by Hannaford. But seriously though, I'm very excited and honored to be considered for this role, and I really can't wait to get started. Thank you.
Mr. Beauparlon.
Yes, I'd just like to attest that I have known Jeff for a number of years in the capacity of as a high school softball assigner and umpire. I can attest to he thinks quickly on his feet. He's a problem solver and has all the attributes that will make an excellent assistant principal. So I don't want to be premature, but hopefully welcome aboard.
Appreciate that.
Anyone else? I'll take a motion. Ms. Hurd.
I'll make the motion. Move to make.
I'll second that
I-
motion.
I sort of have a motion from Ms. Hurd and second by Ms. Whitlow. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Congratulations, Jeff.
Agenda item number 6 is introduction of the new middle school principal, Amanda Winslow.
So I don't think Amanda really needs much introduction because she's a known face. She's also been in Lewiston for a long time. But as you all know, Ty Thurlow has stepped down as principal at Lewiston Middle School, and through lots of conversations and lots of thought, Superintendent Langlis and I approached Amanda about taking on the challenge of Lewiston Middle School, and she has graciously accepted. So we wanted to officially introduce her as the new middle school principal. And she's already been working over there and been meeting with staff and doing some professional learning with them this week. So she's actually kind of had her feet in both worlds, still at Farwell and still at the middle school.
I want to chime in if I can too, and just share that think very highly of Amanda. Obviously, I know she's up for this challenge. We're going to be filling an assistant principal role there also. But Amanda worked there obviously very closely with me for multiple years when I was there as the principal. So she knows the building, she knows the routines, she knows a lot of the people. But I would say that Amanda has a particular strength in working with students in this age grouping. So very excited about what she'll bring to the school and the routines and the production of the day-to-day working with kids that she's very passionate about in a space that she's already familiar with. So the learning curve won't be like a new person. So thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, Jake and Karen. So Jake was actually the beginning of my administrative career years ago when he hired me as the assistant principal at Lewiston Middle School. And I really enjoyed that age a lot. I am one of the crazy people who love grades 6 through 8. It's just a really dynamic time for kids, and I love to be a part of it and to make a difference in what they do. And I also think there's really something special about middle school staff. You have to be a really special person to love teaching the middle school level. And so when Jake and I started having conversations a few weeks ago, it was just wasn't on my radar. Honestly, it wasn't something that I thought of. I'm very happy at Farwell. This is bittersweet, definitely. Farwell is an amazing place, and I've really enjoyed my time there. But through conversations, I thought, hey, you were right all those years ago. Maybe you'll be right again. So just in the past couple of weeks, I've really I really feel like I am coming back to home, and it feels comfortable. It feels like there's a lot of work to do. And I look forward to working with the students and the staff and families so that we can make LMS the best possible place it can be. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda, for all your work. Congratulations. Item 7 on the agenda is the consent agenda. It's transactions, minutes, and personnel. Is there any member of the committee that would like to remove a consent agenda item or set it aside for further discussion? Seeing none, there are nothing set aside. The consent agenda is adopted. The next item on the agenda is public input. Members of the public may address the school committee for up to 3 minutes on non-agenda items now and on agenda items later. Comments that pertain to staff, personal matters, or student issues should be directed to the superintendent or the appropriate staff member of the Lewiston Public Schools. Public comment shall be directed to the school committee, be brief, non-repetitive, and related to the matter at hand. Before starting, please state your name, address, and affiliation to Lewiston Public Schools. Is there anyone in attendance who would like to address the school committee at this time? Seeing none, I'll close the public session. The next item, number 9, is to receive and potentially vote on a field trip request to Eastern Maine Community College for the Senior Summer Academy on July the 25th and 26th. I believe we have Kate Chase to represent them.
Yes, hi. The Senior Summer Academy is the 25th through the 26th, and then the Junior Summer Academy is the 27th through 29th. The bridge year is a time where LHS students can take college classes through LHS with LHS teachers, but in conjunction with professors from like UMaine Augusta and other places, Thomas, and they get credits that way. So they're going up to Bangor, where they will stay over at EMCC and tour some colleges and do some fun things and meet other cohorts from around the state. And we'll have 2 chaperones on each trip. And EL is coming with us, and they will also have 2 chaperones.
Kate, how many students?
About 10 each trip.
Okay. Other questions from the committee? Mr. Mcmahon.
Yes, hello. I'm very familiar with the bridge program on the other side of the river. It is a rigorous program. It opens doors for students that might not have the avenues, and any college exploration is much worth it. So I would urge support for this.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I think under the circumstances where this is consecutive and it's the same thing, we can take a motion to approve both items, number 9 and 10 together. So I'd take a motion. Ms. Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion that we receive and approve a field trip request to Eastern Maine Community College for the Senior Summer Academy on July 25th and 26th, and also approve a request for the Eastern Maine Community College for the Junior Summer Academy for July 27th and 29th.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
There's a second by Ms. Parks. Questions or discussion?
Now that's how you make a motion right there.
Jeez, Mr. Beaumont.
Just the presumptive cost and sleepover arrangements and all that's going to be dealt with.
It'll be no cost to students. It's through the bridge fund, bridge year. So what we pay, students pay like $460 if they join bridge to get all their credits, and it's just included in everything.
And will Eastern Maine provide residents, or how's
Yes.
that working?
Yep, they're staying over at Eastern Maine Community College.
Thank you.
Anyone else with comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll take a vote. All in favor? That approved, that's approved unanimously.
Thank you.
Good luck. The next item on the agenda, number 11, is to receive an update on the Longley School. I guess we'll turn that over to the superintendent.
Yeah, I'd like to start by sharing a few things, but also maybe as I'm sharing a few things, Bill Grant could go up to the podium. It's been a great lead in helping take care of things, especially since I'm not in town right now. The spaces actually look amazingly better already. The cleanup has gone very well. Our IT folks, our facility staff, with Bill coordinating with insurance and the other supports, have really helped inventory and take care of the physical plant, at least to get it picked up and somewhat reorganized. The outpouring of support from community has been fantastic. I do think that there's a silver lining in all this. I know I sometimes think that way, and really the support has been amazing, and we're going to continue to work forward and make sure things are ready, not just for school in the fall, but for programming that's coming right up, for community use in some of those spaces that's already been committed to, and executing the insurance components and seeing how we can better the space. The students that were involved, there were actually 4 that were charged. I believe that it's been shared publicly in the media. 3 of them are local and at the elementary age level, and 1 is not a local who lives and resides in another town. When I return, I will be reaching out to those families to talk about some next steps with them, but also looking to have a meeting with the school committee and talk about some next steps with those students to see how we can encourage, I'll say, an effort where they can give back a little after the damage they've caused. Bill, I don't know if you want to provide more input.
I just really want to thank the technology staff and our custodial staff for the fast approach they had of going in there and getting that place cleaned up so that we could then get in there and assess where we were with things. It wasn't an easy thing to do because we had to save everything for insurance purposes and document that, and there's a whole lot to go to that. But what those 2 departments did is really phenomenal. I also just, it was kind of near and dear to me because I was in adult ed, and that was a place during my tenure that we moved up to and got that space, and there was so much behind that. But really the team approach with this as well. I happened to be away when I got the text about it. Jake was still in town. He went over there. Karen's been doing great on camera and being in interviews. And just kind of that coordinating internally has been really a great thing to see in such a tragic kind of situation. And I think Jake kind of covered everything. There is some things that as far as insurance that we have to document. So that's slowing the process of people that want to volunteer or do those things, because we've got to make sure that we have that stuff documented. Adult ed was in there today. Their staff, they were able to go through and kind of put things back the way that they were, and they're actually going to be able to bring students in tomorrow to a section of that building, again, because of what everybody did to get that ready. I saw it the night before the cleaning started, and I didn't even have a timeline. And then the next morning, literally, I was like, adult ed can probably get in here on Monday. And sure enough, they have. They've got to finish some testing with students, so it was pretty imperative that they get in there, and they're going to be doing that tomorrow. So I know there's people chomping at the bit to do some volunteering. I think Jake will share more out about that, but I also think we got to let our building leaders there, get their feet under them and get their staff in a place where they can be, and then they can kind of process where the volunteering and things like that can happen.
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen in a moment too. Some pictures that Bill took after kind of phase one of cleanup, just to give people at least a visual of progress being made. And as I do that, I just also want to share that there's no, there's really no, there's no way to try to explain how it must feel to people that were in those spaces, and to work in those spaces, and just have them be turned over like they were. So it's a real challenge. See if I can get this to come up here. Can you see the picture? Sorry, I can't hear. Is it showing on your side?
Yeah.
This is the adult ed office that was absolutely turned upside down. So again, it's just phased process. This is the break room that had the refrigerator turned over, and the conference room table was all covered. And this is one of the labs that had desks and things turned over. You can still see some remnants, certainly, but it's a vast improvement. We'll have to figure out what we're going to do with like the concrete wall that has a textured surface here on the left of this hallway. We may end up just having to paint over all of that. So again, still disheartening, but at least I think a lot of people came together. As Bill said, a lot of people put in like extra time, extra hours, extra effort. And we'll continue to follow.
Questions from the committee, Ms. Scott?
Thank you. So I just want to thank you, Jake, Karen, Bill, for your leadership on this, for doing what needed to be done on this. But I'd also like you to take a thank you from us to the IT department, to the staff that has done all that work. I think it's really important that they hear from the school committee that we thank them for their hard work. And please always remember that we are here. I'm here. I know everybody here would do whatever you need to have done after this is all the insurance and everything. If we've got to go paint concrete walls, I'll go paint a concrete wall, no problem. But I am really happy to see those pictures and to see that tomorrow they'll be able to have people going in there and really being able to use that for the summer programming. So thank you again.
Ms. Whitlow?
Yeah, I just want to piggyback off of what Linda said, and I just want to make sure that we mention the custodial staff. I know that you probably in your head you were thinking it, but you didn't say it. But obviously they did a huge efforts there. So thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Bopalon?
I can just echo the sense of shock here. If I may just digress for a moment. My first year at Edward Little, there was a vandalism and arson that forced a bunch of us teachers to teach in an windowless cafeteria for about 6 weeks. It's like a desecration of a sacred place, and doors were locked and everything else. So I can only imagine what that is like, seeing it and coming upon it. And hopefully we'll all see the before and after pictures, and it'll be, as we say, lessons learned.
I guess under the circumstances, we probably consider ourselves somewhat lucky after what happened down in Bath, where they actually arsoned the school down there a couple of weeks ago. this could have been significantly worse. And I'm not making any judgment call here. This is horrendous. And, you know, we will have to try to find some way to instill some sort of responsibility in those responsible for this at all levels. And I think it's imperative that we learn from this lesson too, that maybe there's some other things that we need to be doing to the buildings to protect them. Evidently, there is no intrusion alarm system in that building. And, you know, that I guess we like to think that the schools are, as Paul said, somewhat of a sacred place and that people respect them. But I guess this is part of our brave new world that we have to live in today, as much as I hate to say that. Anything else, Mr. Superintendent?
No, I think that's all from me, but again, I'll echo the same thing everybody else said, that I use the term facility staff, but you know, the custodians land in that area, but they really stepped up. We had a lot of people from facilities offering to help and get over there and work the hours it took to just get it cleaned up. And I do think we were fortunate that it wasn't worse. The bad situation is really bad. But I think that the community too, I think, was heartbroken a bit by this. And I think that we'll have to come back stronger, and we'll have to find and create that accountability mechanism for, you know, those involved. But I know this committee's committed to that work, so we'll be doing that.
Thank you. Anyone else? We'll move on. The next item on the agenda is to review and potentially vote on the second reading of the following policies. BDG, which is School Attorney Legal Services. BEB, School Committee Use of Social Media. And JJIB, Sponsorship and Evaluation of Athletic Programs.
So at our last meeting, I believe we had the first reading and there were no suggestions for edits. So we're just bringing them back to the committee for the second reading and approval if that's the desire of the committee.
Questions or comments from Ms. Paquette? Seeing none, I'll take a motion. Ms. Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion that we receive and approve the following policies: BDG, School Attorney Legal Services; BEB, School Committee Use of Social Media; and JJIB, Sponsorship and Evaluation of Athletic Programs.
We have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Parks. Discussion. Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor? Motion passes unanimously, 9-0. All of those three items are approved as for policy.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. May I suggest that we let the news know that we've already had our discussion on Longley? I'm not sure that he'd want to stay, but I think that we should inform him that we've just had that discussion and we're done that part of the agenda.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Item number 13, to review and potentially vote on a first reading of the following policies.
No need to throw.
No, I didn't mean to. BCC, which is nepotism. BDF, which is school committee advisory committees. BEDF, which is a voting method. BEDFA, which is abstentions, and BEDI, which is school committee relations with the media. Ms. Paquette.
Thank you, Bruce. So BCC, you will notice on the tracked version, there was some additions to this policy, some resulting in some change of law during the COVID pandemic. And we have made those adjustments there on BCC. BDF, get there. BDF is a policy, as the chair said, school committee advisory committees. This is a new policy for Lewiston Public Schools Policy Committee. So you'll just see the language there for that new policy. BD, nope, sorry. BEDF, it's like vegetable soup here. That one is also a new, so voting methods and abstentions is also a new policy, both new policies for our policy manual based on the audit of our policy manual a couple of years ago. And BEDI is also a new policy to our policy manual. So the policies you see in front of you in the folder are actually the language from the state with a few tweaks from the policy subcommittee. And we bring those to you for the first reading.
Questions? Ms. Bowden.
Can I, so the voting method, the BEDF, I guess it's just more of a clarification for me. Why would we need to do a roll call vote with specific members saying yes, no, or abstain instead of just showing hands? Just for my own knowledge, I'm just curious why we have that in there.
I think part of that goes back to where we were at when we were somewhat remote. That way the public would know who had that people actually had voted and whether they were in the affirmative or against it. Where we are still on occasion allowing folks to Zoom in, we would want to make sure that that was recorded properly. There are times when if it's any member can call for it to be a roll call vote, and I would recognize that and request that. It doesn't have to happen, but it can. And so having it in the policy, I think makes sense. So make it allowed. Is we're all right here and we can see each other, obviously raising hands makes sense. But if someone's remote, they can't see that. So that would also allow anyone who's remote to know, what the other votes were at the same time. So we're all involved and all informed. Ms. Scott?
I just wanted to add that on that particular policy, like many boards and city councils, selectmen, that sort of thing, that is pretty much a regular standard when somebody calls for that to have it for public record, particularly for past, when people look up past public voting records, it's there so that you can see exactly who voted yes or no for what.
I have one more question, Mr. Chair. So maybe an edit for this would be to add that, if we were doing a roll call, where we were voting individually, I think it happened one time and not even on purpose, where someone was like, oh, I don't know how I want to vote yet. Can you come back to me? Can we add something where we're not coming back to someone so they can listen to all the votes before they make their decision? And I'm not saying that happened, but there's a chance that could happen. And kind of, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. You can, by the other policy that's here, you can abstain. So if you really are unsure of how you want to vote, you can just abstain. And that would be recorded as an abstention as well. So and I hear what you're, I'm trying to decide, so skip over me and come back.
Yeah, so I just don't think that would be appropriate in a roll call vote to come back to someone later after everyone else has voted and they can make their decision. Is that something we can put in the policy stating the roll call goes in order, you can abstain, but you can't skip and come back? Is that covered somewhere?
Well, okay, well, hang on a sec. Hang on a sec. Ms. Eames.
Thank you. I was going to say something else, which is that you can't just abstain for that reason that you don't know the answer that you want. You don't know what to vote. There's only, you can see in B, E, D, F, A. There's certain ways to abstain, certain reasons to abstain that are delineated.
Right.
I just wanted
Yeah,
to make that
no,
clear.
That's clear. And that's why I think that's the reason why that's also in there as well. Ms.
But
Parks?
then, yeah.
Yeah, along the same lines, if we're at a vote, whether it's roll call or not, you have three options: vote yes, vote no, or abstain. And then the next policy covers the reasons you can abstain. So if somebody said, I'm stuck, I don't know which way to vote, then going to the abstention policy spells out that then the conversation may need to continue at that time. And so the voting would stop anyways, and the conversation would continue. So I think those two policies together that cross-reference each other cover both of those scenarios. The only question that I have on that, which I didn't think of when we discussed this before, is if somebody calls the vote, that means all conversation is done and you're going to vote. But then in that situation, if somebody says, I still don't know, that seems like that probably wouldn't happen very often, but it seems like that's going to hit a bump because somebody wants to learn more, but somebody's called the vote. So that's the only place I see that having some friction. But I think to answer your question, both of these policies together prevent that from happening.
So if somebody calls the vote, and just for clarification, Robert's Rules of Order say that there's no discussion, that's what we're going to do. So if somebody has an issue and feels like they need more, I would hope that the chair or whoever's in charge is going to say that you're going, you have to, it's yes or no, or an abstention, because there is no more conversation after that. And I would also like to point out that it does say that when voting by roll call, the members shall be called in order by ward. So that gives it right there too.
Of course, what's changed there is usually if we will sometimes we'll start with, we say all votes would start with Ward 3 and move around. So in order makes sense, but it doesn't necessarily mean starting always with 1. Whoop.
I do think that Linda Scott has raised an issue, though. If one of our things says you can't abstain just because you don't know what you think, and the other one says you have to go in order, then our argument here that if you don't know what you think, we should have more discussion, we've got a problem, because having called the question, then there's no official way to have more discussion unless we put in some other provision for halting the calling the question that the chair could do. Do you see what I mean? We've got a problem. Well, we have to write that, don't we? No? It seems to me that you brought up a good point that we need to figure out in our second reading, when we do our second reading, how to work this out.
If I may, just, I think if someone calls a vote, there's certainly Robert's rules that guide that process, or a roll call vote. But also, and I've seen this in other committee work, that if you are unsure, and you get into that process, short of another rule or policy that provides for a different pathway, you are able to vote no, on the grounds of you're undecided. So I'm trying to think of the pressure cooker like situations with some of the hot topics that we have tackled. I do think Member Bowden brings up a good point that we shouldn't pass people to see. It is more information that is available to someone to try to just vote with a majority because they're unsure. I think the role does have more responsibility than that. Again, I don't think this committee has done that, so I don't think I'm causing problems for anyone, but I do think that it would be better practice to have the vote when it's that next turn. And again, vote no if you want. And another motion could be made if things are voted down, or revisited at a future agenda. That's what needs to happen. But I also worry that language around if someone calls the vote because something has been discussed for some time, or maybe multiple times at length, there's precedent that is in fact able to be done. And I think there's times where that's necessary. But I think if you include language that says if a vote is called, you can actually deliberate more if you wish, because you're unsure how you're going to vote. We get into that filibuster like conversation where someone could use the technique or strategy of I'm just going to talk and ask questions for 4 hours until we just decide to do away with the process. So I worry about that too.
Can I continue? I look here now, if a member needs more clarification before the vote, they must ask for more deliberation. I see before the vote is here. So I think we're okay. We don't have to revisit this for next time.
Ms. Whitlow. You're good? Okay. I mean, it hasn't happened much in this term. In a previous term, we did have some significantly extended discussions, and eventually it did get to a call vote. My understanding of Robert's rules and really the duties of the chair is to make sure that every person has had at least one opportunity to address the issue so that there shouldn't be a misunderstanding. And I've always tried to make sure that if someone still appears to be confused or uncertain, let that continue. But we do have work to do. We do have to make decisions. Some of them are tough. And that when we get to a point that it's time to vote, then, as the superintendent said, if you really can't support it, then vote no. But we do have to keep things moving. As we've seen, sometimes these meetings can drag on quite a long time over something that really may or may not be worth the, it's not that it's not worth the effort, but that sometimes it just gets to be bogged down in the minutia of the item. And it's not moving the district forward. Someone, rather than just call a vote, can call for tabling so it can come back. And that may be a better approach. Ms. Whitlow.
All right, so Ms. Bowden has a perfect thought, because when we talked about the religious holidays, that's when it occurred, when came to me and I didn't know how I was going to vote. And that's the scenario that I think everybody's talking about and thinking about. And we passed on me and came back to me. I did not vote with the majority, but either way, it is controversial. And I know that I didn't say just pass me and I'll come back to me. I think it was just kind of like, everybody was like, just come. It just kind of happened. So I think that it is important that whoever's chair just kind of guides that and making sure that we're doing things ethically. So I know the faults that took place, and I think we can recognize that. But if there is something that we can put in place in a policy that might help the next board coming on to help guide them, that wouldn't be a bad thing.
Ms. Bowden.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I was not trying to call you out, Tanya. It was a scenario that happened, and when it happened, it made me think. So when this policy came to be, it was still kind of in the back of my mind, like, somewhere in the future, not even this committee, there could be a situation where that happens again. And I just think it's important that we keep a roll call in order without skipping anybody to go back to the end. So no, I appreciate you clarifying that. Thank you.
Since we've had this discussion, does someone want to make a recommendation to amend the policy as presented to add something? Well, we're talking about it. I mean, if we're going to modify it at this first reading, that would be the appropriate time to change it. So when it does come back as a second reading, we can either approve it or not approve that one particular item. Ms. Scott.
you know, looking at this and I'm not seeing specific, I'm not thinking of specific language to really add to this at this point. I hear what's been said, but I don't know. I really feel that unless we add something about the chair, because I really feel it's important that the chair is the lead on this sort of thing, right? And the chair, like Ms. Whitlow had just stated, is the guiding person on this to ensure that everybody has the opportunity to speak on an issue, but also to ensure that as the vote goes, it's done in the proper way. That's, in my opinion, the role of the chair, part of the role of the chair. I'm sorry, I got vacation brain. I apologize. I'm already ready to go. So my head's not thinking, but I don't know if there's specific language that we need to particularly add to that, I guess is where I'm at right now.
Ms. Paquette.
Would it be helpful if the word shall was removed? Because that leaves some flexibility in, I'm looking at the voting method policy. That leaves some open.
Which shall, or all of them?
Well, I could be any of them. I like black and white, so it could be any of them, but it doesn't have to be. I guess I was thinking more about the shall in the first part of the sentence where it says, when voting by roll call, the members will be called in order by ward, and each member will respond yes or no or abstain.
I actually think that would just completely solve it. Yes.
Is there a consensus on the board that would do it? Yes. Okay. Then, I would recommend that be the correction as presented at the time.
Can we call the vote?
Okay. So I would need a motion on these 5 items: BCC, BDF, BEDF, BEDFA, and BEDI. Ms. Scott.
Well, I apologize, but I'm not prepared to call the motion because I have something I want to say about BEDI, and which is board relations with the media. So in looking at this, my concern here, and I'm not sure if language should be added in this one, is with social media. So we get on social media, we could actually be, I know on my particular social, I have to be very careful. I have people that are part of the press on my friends list. So they could see something and construe it as a comment that actually should be coming from the chair. And I think it's very important that so I'm not sure if there's something that should be put in there, because that could be considered a comment on an issue where really any comments or any inquiries that are happening, the spokesman of the school committee is the chair of the school committee. It's not me. It's not for somebody from Ward 3 or Ward 5, you know what I mean? It's the chair. And so I was just a little concerned about that, because my first thought when I read the whole policy, and I like what it says, is that social media puts us in a totally different game. So I'm not sure if we need more there, and I would want to hear what others have to say.
Ms. Parks.
From the perspective of the policy committee, I think that the discussion was more around the language that says when individual committee members receive requests from the news media. So like when we get the phone calls or the emails or the text messages or all the things saying, I'm so-and-so from channel blah, 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 I'd like to talk to you later. I think that it's more in reference to that, and that like the canned reply is, here's the chair's information, please refer to the chair, which is what most of us have already done anyways. I think that if they're taking quotes from other places, I think that's different. I don't know that there's a way to regulate that. But for them reaching out and requesting information from any one of us, we should be redirecting to the chair. I think that that's really what this policy is more about.
Ms. Scott.
I would agree with that. And upon thinking about it a little further, as you just stated, that maybe where that language needs to be is in our ethics policy at the beginning, when the chair, you know what I mean, when the board comes together, and that's something that we discuss at that point, to be cautious about what your conversations are on social media, maybe have it further that way instead of directly written into a policy. I wouldn't disagree.
Ms. Bowden, did you have something?
Well, no, I was going to say, the way that she touched on it kind of sounded like it belonged with the social media policy. Just, I've seen myself and other school committee members comment on things after meetings, like, kind of decompressing to the public about how we felt about something, like things like that happen sometimes. And I don't look at that as if the media were to grab onto that because it's on a social media platform. I don't look at that as us reaching out to social media or to reporters. Or I know for me, for example, every time a reporter reaches out to me by email, social media, I respond with, please reach out to our superintendent or our chair for further comment. And I leave it at that every single time. But yeah, again, like whatever they pull off social media for a quote, I don't know that that's the best practice, but that is what it is.
Ms. Scott?
Thank you. So I guess a lot of this my mind's not going here because of this board. My mind's going here because of a previous board. And where there was somebody that was not the chair, that was very vocal with the press and very vocal to put things on their social media and do those things. So I'm just cautious for the future that we just making sure that when we do have those conversations or the press reaches out, that it is just the superintendent or the chair speaking for the whole school board.
Ms. Parks?
Following up on that, it's covered in our procedural rules maybe, or our code of ethics, code of conduct, one of those that says, unless we're sitting at this table and in session, we don't represent the school committee. So the comments that I think you're referring to that always started with, as a member of the Lewiston School Committee, blah, 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 that would be inappropriate already per our procedural rules. So I think it's already covered. I think these pieces are all over the place in what guide us. And I think that is covered.
Can I just share one piece? We have had, not this group, but we have had people get up from the table during a 5-minute break and do an interview with the media in the same room. And I know that this group has been fantastic about the media and kicking things to Bruce and I, and that's appreciated. But I will also note that I think that there were a number of members who were on that prior committee who were wondering and asking, what do we do about this? What is that next step? Is this censure? Is this something else? But I don't think that was ever really decided. Not that I'm trying to complicate this conversation any more than it already is, but what authority does the committee have to call someone out on that kind of behavior? And what does that look like? Essentially, is there a process for censure that the committee should consider?
Ms. Scott?
So hate to be the troublemaker, but is there any possible way that this one particular policy, we can pull it out, we can have a discussion on this, our ethic and the other pieces that go along with media, and ensure that maybe if there needs to be language, like Jake just suggested, and I actually would be in favor of that kind of language, that we can have that discussion further with a little bit more clarity and a little bit more information.
Well, we don't currently have a motion on the table to accept any of these. So I guess if you would like to remove this last one from discussion and ask for it to be tabled or brought back at a different time, that would certainly be your prerogative, and now might be an appropriate time to make such a motion.
Why, thank you, Mr. Chair. So at this time, I would like to make a motion that we table the policy BEDI, school committee relations with the media, until we can have further clarification on our ethics policy, our communication with the media, and all other aspects to that. Thank you.
We have a second for the motion as presented. Ms. Hurd.
I second that.
So the motion before us at the moment is to remove BEDI, school committee relations with the media, from agenda item 13. This is a motion by Ms. Scott, seconded by Ms. Hurd. Is there discussion? Ms. Parks?
When we do have a conversation about this. I would like feedback from our legal representative. I know when I was chair, I had some conversations regarding censuring and how what we were allowed to do and what policies were there and what protections we had. And I think getting that feedback again would be helpful in that conversation.
Further discussion about this, but the tabling motion on the table, right, that's before us. Okay. So the motion is to remove BEDI from this discussion. All in favor? That's unanimous. That's a 9-0. Now, we can go back to the previous four. BCC nepotism, BDF school committee advisory committees, BEDF voting method, and BEDFA abstentions. I have a motion in regard to those four items. Ms. Bowden.
Thank you. It's just a first reading of those, correct? And so if I make this motion, the discussion that we had will be taken into account with the further edits before it comes to us for a second reading. Okay, so I'd like to make a motion to pass BCC, BDF, BEDF, and BEDFA with the discussed revisions.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Parks. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? The first reading of these four items is passed with a 9-0 vote. Next item on the agenda is item 14, to review and potentially vote on hourly and salary personnel policies. This is to the superintendent, and I guess Mr. Grant has his his packages.
So just for the superintendent and the community, Bill is talking and you can't hear him. He's passing out copies of the personnel policy, and I'll just summarize what he said. He said that we do have them, or can have them electronically, a copy of this. I can't speak tonight either. A copy of this electronically, but he knew that some would like it in hard copy, and so here's the hard copy, and that there are no page numbers on the hard copy. I think that's all that Bill said.
Correct.
The bill will have a number of things to share. I did share a brief memo with this, and just as a reminder, this is returning to this conversation because last time I was trying to share it and it wasn't showing the adjustments that were being made. And I tried about 3 different ways and I still couldn't get it in your hands in the right format. Bill and Susanna, our HR director, and Adam have all worked on this, as have I. And we've also shared this with the policy subcommittee and talking about how we're looking to break these pieces out. And so those are some of the pieces those are the pieces that you have before you to move things from more operational and instructional and separating the two so that these read as more sensible. And I think as we move forward in the future with scales and different processes, because this is not a unionized group. This is just language that guides us for our non-unionized folks who are not part of an association. So Bill, I'll let you jump into some of the things that will come up.
Okay, so Jake did say that we broke it out into 2 documents. You have one in front of you. This would be the operations personnel policies that you have in front of you. And then I'll pass around the teaching and learning personnel policies. And as Jake talked about, what we were trying to do is split those out into personnel policies that would be more applicable for positions. So that's kind of step one with this. The first part of the document is going to be pretty similar for both of them until we get into the appendix, say what group this covers. So with the lack of page numbers, if we just want to flip through, the table of contents doesn't have any changes. The page after that says Lewiston Public Schools, Lewiston, Maine, and I'll try to read what's on the top so you know what page we're on. No change there. The next page, initial appointment of employment, no change. Then we get to reinstatement, and then we get to section 7, holidays. We added the Juneteenth holiday, and then the 2 Jewish holidays that were removed from a previous school committee. So that's just updating that. The crossed out language below is again just taking that out of there and making that edit. Any questions? All right, next, sick leave, no change on that page. The next page where it has health insurance, down at the bottom in blue, we added that. The reason that we added that is that's been our practice, but it wasn't in policy, so that's why we added that particular piece, so that people knew when they can make changes to their health insurance according to practice. Next page, education and training, there's no changes. Conflict resolution procedures, no changes. Employee groups, that's where we get into the change. So when I pass out this other hard copy, you'll see which ones were crossed out there and which ones were kept. So in this particular one in the operations, this talks about who's covered. Next page, where it says vacation in bolds, there's no changes there. The next page down at the bottom, mileage reimbursement, we had already gone through with personnel policies to utilize the IRS rate. And so we just put that in the personnel policies. If you turn the next page, we did add a section, and this is kind of from an administrative standpoint. There's people that submit mileage every month, and they give us a whole rundown of like drove, from Dingley to Connors and Dingley to Farwell. And what we did here is if we're noticing things like that and we can establish a pattern, we could issue a stipend for travel, based on that information. In section 5, that's just a grammatical edit. People don't know this, but our controller, Adam Hansen, is actually an English major. So he gets into proofreading when he goes through these things. The next page, retirement plan. So we offer this, again, this is a practice that we do, and we just wanted to ensure exactly what that was. And so that's why we put that into the policy. Next page is this, the legal authority for the document, along with the following page. Then we get into Appendix B. What's removed from here, and you'll see it again in the other document, is the substitute teachers and all that's crossed out. The only thing left in here is the food service age, lunch monitors, and food service substitutes. We also added the section on the bottom, and that's to comply with the earned paid leave law that we had to make sure that we addressed. Again, Appendix C is going to be in the other document that I pass out. Then when we get into the new Appendix C, this is where you'll see the school operational. And that's where you'll see some red lines through people that are geared more towards education, are not in this particular document anymore. They'll be in the other one. And the people that are dealing with operations will be in this one. For those that don't know, we have kind of 2 sections here. This first section where you see an SMN, that stands for non-exempt. Those are our hourly positions and obviously are non-exempt from overtime. We also removed the technology support specialists and systems administrator, and that had to do with they have their own CBA now. So those positions are no longer in this group. Then we go on. Oh, go ahead.
Can I just jump in real quick? As Bill talks about some of the red line positions that are out, some of those are just because they belong in the other, break out the more instructional folks. There's also some rationale behind the scenes too with budget impacts and also those who qualify for main state retirement versus those who do not. So that's where that exempt and non-exempt piece comes in. But also for many years now, we discovered this in our budgeting work that there have been positions in the personnel policies that we didn't hire and from my understanding didn't intend to hire, but they were included in the budget. And so the other piece of this is we worked to pull those positions out that are no longer. We've reclassified things to the actuals and we have removed things that we don't have. So it's moving forward. It's not something that gets budgeted because it's not in here.
So then we get into the pay scale. So you can understand what we did with that. We just did an across the board 4% increase to those steps. The changes down at the bottom were just to update the dates. Now, when we get into this next appendix, this is the SMEs, that's for exempt. Those are salaried people. This is a formatting thing. We didn't, we pulled them out in the Google Doc. That's why you're not seeing as many red lines in here. So when I share the other one with you, you'll see where a lot of those positions went. And then the next page is the salary schedule. And again, we did a 4% across the board with those. And that is our personnel policies. There is one number change though. If you look on Appendix D2, that would be the hourly. For the SMN 3, 4, and 5, step 8, we didn't have the right calculation in there, and I have that number for you if you want to write it down, but so you know what we're looking at here. So for the SMN 3, step 8, it would be 2169. For the 4, same lane at step 8, it would be 2307. And then for the 5, same lane, 8, it'd be 2469. And that was something that Adam came to me and we realized that we had calculated that particular one wrong, so. And then I can pass out the teaching and learning. And again, you'll probably want to flip to those last salary pages so that you can see, and it's very similar.
While Bill's passing that out, I also want to mention that we usually review these in the spring. Some other negotiations processes are obviously underway. We were hopeful to have some of those things come to fruition, and I think they're close, but they're not quite there yet. These all land with that July 1 conversation point. So while we're hopeful that these get approved tonight, if not, we can certainly bring it back and take care of things from a retro perspective. But again, we usually would do these in and around the season so that we have these numbers. We did appropriate for some increases just from a smart financial budgeting perspective, but that's why it's before you today.
And so in the Google Doc that's shared with you, this front page has been changed, but if you want to write on the one I just shared with you, teaching and learning, and then the other one, operational.
So I know that for most of you, sorry, Bruce, I was talking
go
without your permission.
go ahead.
for most of you, this is probably it's like reading Japanese, right? Like it just doesn't make any sense. It probably didn't make sense to me for a long time. I didn't understand why we were being brought these versus why they weren't negotiated. And so like, there's just a lot, but I mean, now all I do is live and breathe contracts. So I feel like I understand it a lot better, but I'm still learning. So if there's questions that you guys have, please don't feel like, you know, you don't sound intelligent if you ask those questions, because I'm sure you have some.
And while people are looking through in the teaching and learning one that I passed out, an Appendix C towards the back, there's the salary structure, and this pertains to adult ed. We did make some changes there. Obviously, I was the old adult ed director, and there were some things that hadn't been updated in this in years past that were. So you can imagine at first I was like, hey, we need to change these things. But then a more significant, when it was more of like that top portion of naming people intermittent and temporary, so that wasn't being confused that with the benefits and whatnot. But the real change was down at the bottom in that red, and this is actually Jen Tyner and Rizal Ward, the director and assistant director, when they were here talking about that grant that they just received. This was kind of in reference to that. And essentially, what that allows to happen is anything that's a grant funded or a contracted position, they can work with the superintendent to look at an hourly wage for that position. So kind of just a for example for you, how I see this mechanism working is, you know, we used to just have a workforce piece and an hourly rate that we paid somebody. But where they're going to be doing some trainings, it's not going to just be an instructor of, say, CNA programming. It's going to kind of be a position that's going to have some managerial pieces to it, some grant accountability to it. And so this allows it to be more at the market rate of like what a kind of the duty of, say, a charge nurse would do at a facility. So it is only for grant funded positions and contracts. And so it would be laid out in that, what the hourly rates would be.
Thank you. Just to reiterate, you did say 4% on that one as well, right? For the salary? Was that a 4% increase?
For the adult ed?
Yeah.
It's actually based on the number of hours that they put in a semester. So if they taught at least 150 hours, then they would get a 50-cent an hour increase. Yeah, and that kind of goes back to an old practice. Actually, probably when you were on the school board previously, we had language like that.
Mr. Chair. Thank you. I just have a question about training, and I'm thinking about this because of, and I don't know if anyone actually has the answer to this, but it made me think because of like overtime and stuff like that. If a teacher misses training for one reason or another, how is that made up? Like, are they required to do that like on their planning time? Is it like set aside? Do they get overtime to like if they stay late to do training? Like, I don't even know if that's like a thing. I'm just thinking like in my head, overtime, you're paying. That just is what made me think of it when you were talking about like overtime and versus salary. And
so the overtime would be for these positions that are named in there. And that would have to be something that's approved by, say, a manager and then ultimately signed off on by the superintendent. So it has to remain in that budget. But there's overtime that can be built into our budget. And then there's kind of those emergency situations where there's overtime and we have to look at how we're gonna pay for that and ultimately talk to the superintendent to get it approved.
Mr. Chair. I just wanted to respond to Mrs. Hurd. Yeah, so the teachers aren't in these contracts. I'm not sure if you were aware of that or not. Okay, that's all I want to say.
Yeah.
Bill?
Yep.
As far as we know, all of the SME scales currently meet the new standard that was set out recently by DOL.
Yep, as far as we know. Yep.
Yeah.
And we did eliminate those SMN 1s and 2s because we didn't have anybody in those classes, so.
Just for
Sorry.
clarification, I'm sorry, but the Department of Labor sets out every year a salary cap that whereby if you earn at least X dollars in salary, you are exempt from overtime. And it was the question was, did this new scale represent the increase to that? Because otherwise you could have had people that were considered exempt when they were not actually under the new current rules. Anyone who doesn't meet that threshold is entitled to overtime if they work more than 40 hours a week. So it's kind of it's a bit of a nightmare for payroll for sure, but it's one of those things. It is one of the things that you can get caught on pretty easily if you're not watching it. So the same is true with minimum wage. As minimum wage cranks up, the people at the very low end of it would have to be adjusted to make sure that we're at least meeting minimum wage.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to approve the 2 new personnel policies.
I'll second that if I may.
We have a motion from Ms. Whitlow and seconded by Ms. Eames to adopt or accept the personnel policies as presented by Mr. Grant. Is there discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you for all the work you've done on that. You and your team, you and Adam, and
Yeah.
whoever else.
Susanna and actually everybody has kind of a part on it, so it's good.
Great. Right. And just for everybody's edification, Susanna, I believe, is the new HR director. Susanna is the new HR director, who many people may not recognize.
Yeah, Susanna Gallant is our new HR director. But whenever I say that, feel free to give Sue accolades too, because I'm sure at some point I'm bouncing it off of Sue anyway, because, you know.
Yeah, and that was not to exclude Ms. Williams in any way, shape, or form. I just. The next item on the agenda is report from school committee chair. There were a couple of things I thought we should at least mention. We had I think, just an incredibly successful graduation. It was a beautiful night. Everyone was there. Was an opportunity really for some of us to finally experience the new ball field. And the turnout, from my perspective, was just wonderful. I think it brought the community together in a way that it hadn't for a while. To try to break the pandemic cycle is something that I felt that we really accomplished with that. Those kids, the young adults who came up on the stage, really, that's our future, and that was exciting to be part of that. So I'm grateful to have been there for that. And all of us, we were all Miss Bowden.
Thank you. No, since you brought up the graduation, I just wanted to give some community input that I received. And I want to echo what you said. That was my very first Lewiston High School graduation that I've attended. And I thought it was so much fun. I thought it was planned well and I really enjoyed it. And I could have stood up there all night and handed out diplomas to those kids. It was just so fun to me. However, I did hear, I've talked to many parents and family members of the kids graduating who were out in the bleachers, and they did say that they couldn't hear anything where they were seated. And so if we continue to use the field for graduation in the future, I just want to make the suggestion that we add speakers out where the bleachers are, if we're going to have seats over there, because those poor people couldn't hear anything and they were so disappointed. And it kind of brought me down off my high a little bit because I just thought it was so great. I thought it was so fun, the fireworks, everything about it. So kudos to everyone who had a hand in planning and executing that graduation. I thought it was wonderful. I just maybe add some more sound next year.
I would hope if they had the sound is out toward the bleachers, not for where we were. It was plenty loud enough where we were. Mr. Bopo.
Yeah, I'd also add to that, it was a wonderful ceremony. The sun going through the cathedral, it was really nice. But every time I step on that field, and I don't want to be the Nancy negative here, I see the broken scoreboard with Minahan's name partially off. And considering what is that family has done for scholarships and contributions and dedication, I wish some way, and I didn't know my authority. I know Jason very well, but I didn't even feel I had the authority to ask him to look into it. But is there some way we can look into fixing that? Because it's just detracts from an otherwise beautiful facility.
So can I chime in on that? Excellent point. It may already be fixed. It was already in the works. We were hoping to have it done before graduation. It just didn't make it. But I know that they were securing a lift and the sign was ready to go. So I'm hopeful that it's already done. If it's not already done, I know it will be happening quite soon. And Mr. Chair, do you mind if I mention something about graduation quickly?
Go for it.
I also had some feedback, and I think that the excitement of the night and the way it ended with the fireworks and all the families on the field and just, hats everywhere. And, there was a lot of energy and it was wonderful compared to the last two that we've had in a parking lot, fighting heat challenges and people in cars and whatnot. But I do want to remind members of our community, this is the first time we used that field and that venue for graduation. And, the list of things that we want to improve on, we're starting on stage. Mr. Dufour was already writing things down in his notes of just ways to, manage people and different ways that people navigated the venue, tickets, no tickets, or tickets but didn't scan them. Where do people sit? What areas would we block off in the future? But the sound piece was definitely a concern that I kept hearing from people that actually read an article in the paper the following day, and we're happy to see a positive article, but also felt like it would have been nice to hear all of those things in person. So definitely some room for improvement. I've also had a conversation with Ms. Scott about putting a form out to people just to get further input, just from a spectator or those who attended perspective. So be looking for that to just be circulated. It's optional, somebody has to fill out, but if people would like to fill that out, we can gather all that input in a spreadsheet so that we can be looking at different ideas and suggestions that people have, so we can get better.
Ms. Hurd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you may or may not know, but Mr. Minahan is my neighbor. And so he did tell me that he had a conversation with Jake earlier about the sign and knew that it was going to be taken care of. So he was just happy to be able to be there and watch his granddaughter graduate. So I just want everyone to know that I know everyone's very passionate about it, but who it really means the most to, he knew that it was getting taken care of and it was on our radar, and he was just happy to be back there. So that's all.
So that was kind of the first item on my report. Ms.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the last thing that I wanted to say is I just wanted to give a shout out to, I believe there were only 2 people that cleaned up chairs and trash and programs and busted balloons. There was a lot going on in that field afterwards. And so a big thank you to the people who did stay and take care of that. And I would also make a suggestion that next year we have a crew of people that can help clean up, because I heard it was an enormous undertaking to clean everything up afterwards. And there were only a couple people who did it. So I would love to help with that next year. If we can just kind of bring that up again as it nears. Thank you.
Yeah, it was a small group, and we're very appreciative of those folks. I went back Saturday morning with my son pretty early, and I had packed my blower and some trash bags, and just going to try to help out. And very early in the morning, it was already done because they stayed and did it well into the night.
So Ms. Bowden, is it okay if I volunteer you for that duty next time?
Yeah, no, I would love to help and clean up, as long as I don't have to drive to New York that night like I did this time. We'll be good.
Okay. We have, we've got a lot of stuff, a lot of work to do. And so that I think graduation really was just such a good end to these 2 years. Hopefully moving forward, it will be, better. And, but that actually, with the fireworks display and the sun going down across the cathedral, it may be a big task to beat that. At least that's a first memory. Yes, absolutely. Other than that, I don't have a lot to report from the chair's position. So I'll move on to the superintendent.
I got a few things I wanted to share. I hate not being in Lewiston right now. It's really a true struggle for me, but want to let you know that we are working on fund use and fund balance language with the city folks. That's something that we started a while back, and we're circling back around. The state has shifted, or at least we're seeing different patterns in funding and alterations to funding. So last year, the school committee voted in late July or mid-July, might have been early August, on use of some funds that had come in, and the funds were a one-time thing from the governor's office to reach that 55% piece. Those funds are going to now end up in fund balance and to be used, for future budgets. I've been working with Heather on the language of it's kind of 3 things that are happening, just to give you a context. First thing that's happening is the state is changing the amount of funds going to municipalities and cities and towns and districts after referendums. And so while that is a plus for funding currently and where things are at in our current budget, it doesn't concern me, but I think in future years that might be much tighter, and that could be right on the horizon. These kinds of funding model shifts could be painful for us because they could transition the other way also. So what's happening is this delayed usage piece. So because of the way part 2 to this is, we do what's called a warrant article for the referendum. And this goes through legal. It's a document that we create. Legal reviews it, city reviews it. It's what's actually used to build the referendum vote numbers by article. And there's a provision in there, number 13, that if there are any additional funds, they are to be used for local tax relief, which is why these funds end up in fund balance, because with a slight delay, it is tax relief. The problem that we're facing is that they're also reducing language around local minimum share. And so it looks like new money, but it's not. And so Heather and I, my team and her team are having conversations about language to make sure that any additional funds that show up are used appropriately in accordance with both charter, state law, local policy and practices to reduce the tax burden for people. So the language doesn't read as perfectly as it could. And so just to let you know as an update, we're working on that. Another notice that went out this week, and it's not for now, it's for next year. As part of our audit process, we're finding that in most districts, grant-funded staff that are teachers get a payout at the end of the school year prior to July 1, and then their pay starts back up. This is an option for teachers right now, but in the future, we're looking at those grant-funded positions that are federally funded and some other sources get the payout instead of pay all summer long. Again, that's a consideration from the auditors and a recommendation for budgets and, for bookkeeping. We had a visit from some Red Cross folks and some folks connected to the state around emergency planning and emergency response. This is a conversation that's continued since the Blake fire last year. We visited and had a meeting at Longley downstairs where the renovations are in a really good place, and we're starting to make that space usable and looking forward. And they had a lot of questions and ideas about grants and funding. So just to keep you posted that we're having some initial conversations around improving our emergency response and maybe how we might use that space. Again, not as like an overnight type space, but we do have the high school currently identified as that emergency shelter space. And there's some conversation that perhaps Longley may be a better space to do that because of the size of the school at the high school during regular operation, with so many people coming in and out while trying to also use that as a shelter. No decisions or anything, but just wanted to keep you posted. Another item that has come up, we had agreed to a vacation cap extension for administrators about a year ago. So that would run through the year, and where negotiations have started looking at keeping that agreement in place until the contract is either settled and or the end of the current fiscal year. The other piece is in conversation that the teachers' contract is obviously being negotiated and hopefully wrapped up soon, so we can recognize all their hard work. If for some extenuating circumstance it is not, just want to remind everyone that $40,000 minimum is in effect from the state, and so that we would have to take care of that once we start salaries back up in the fall. That's all I have for updates right now. Didn't know if anybody had any questions about anything.
Jake, will the state mandated minimum be reflected in the contracts that are sent to the teacher?
So we'll have to, really, I'm hoping that the contract gets itself to a place where it can be signed by both parties. But contracts that went out just recently are based on the existing contract and people getting their steps. And then anyone falling below the 40 will have to take care of that.
They get sent out with 40?
Yeah, they got sent out and anybody got, that's what he said.
He said
Wasn't
that
it?
upset.
Oh, they went out.
Yeah, the contracts have gone out. Bill, did it have anybody under 40? Did they just get the 40 or did it say differently?
So, Mr. Chair, no one's mic was on while that was being said. Maybe you could repeat it.
Well,
I think I'm projecting.
Thank you, Bill.
So we operate under the current contract. So that's the contract that we're using. Obviously, with that current contract, we don't meet the minimum requirement for $40,000. So when contracts went out, any of the steps that people were on that were below 40,000, their contract said that they'll be at $40,000. And then we had a little clause at the bottom that just said, should a new contract be ratified, then you'll get your new contract. So that puts us in compliant with the law.
thank you, Bill. Anything else, Mr. Superintendent?
That's all I had on my list for now.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda, 17, is report from the city council rep. Ms. Scott.
Thank you. So I wasn't here at the last meeting because I was positive for COVID. I've got a few things that I do want to report out on. I will briefly go back to the graduation and the conversation I had with the superintendent. I did ask him also what I was thinking, because I've run many community events and I usually do a debrief at the end of it. I think it's really important for those involved. And I asked if maybe we could have all of the elected officials that were there to just have that, just a memo, send out what your thoughts were, what you like, what you didn't like, how can we fix it? With the understanding that we all understand that this was the first time on the field, but I think it's important moving forward that we all look at all those things. We also, this past Saturday, had the Lewiston Youth Advisory Council had celebrating Lewiston, and I just want to give a shout out to those kids because they did a phenomenal job on a day that was 90 degrees and unfortunately very low turnout from the community. We had Brewfest that day. There were several things going on, but these kids worked really hard, and I just want to let the public know, as I've stated on City Council, that I am super proud of these kids. We also had 10 of the students for that leaving. They graduated this year. So last week, the mayor, myself, and the community relations director, Dottie Parham, had interviews with 13 students. We actually had 16 set up, but only 13 showed, and 13 was exactly what we needed for the new board. And every single one of them, from freshmen to seniors, were enthusiastic, from different backgrounds. I mean, I am so excited for this next group. I think it's going to be a really good thing. A few things that were discussed at last week's city council meeting. We did have our workshop presentation on the Johnson Controls Energy presentation. And I believe that during our conversation about subcommittees, you'll be bringing that up. So I won't go too much further in that, but I will say that the presentation to city council was encouraging and a lot of good things that I'm hoping to see happen and come to fruition as far as energy savings. We also talked about the new automated scale rollout at the solid waste facility, and there'll be some information coming out in the next week to 2 weeks, sent out to everybody about that sort of stuff. We did a bunch of entertainment permits. We had long conversations and several different agenda items on zoning and land use code and some of the language changes that are being done and trying to tighten up some of our zoning processes and make it easier for new businesses to come in. We also had a discussion on bees. I won't go into that. And bees at your house, but it's there. You can watch it on video. And then we also had a presentation with the city regarding our equity, diversity, and inclusion policy. At this time, it has been tabled and we will be looking for further information. Some counselors wanted further information, so we'll be looking further into that. And I would suggest personally that I'd like to see something like this on the school department as well, if that's a possible thing that we could look at and have that discussion at this level as well. And let me see if I've got anything else. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. No student reps are here because we're out of school. We'll skip 18. Updates from school committee subcommittees. Ms. Whitlow?
I'll just talk quickly about negotiations. Tomorrow we meet again with the food service managers. That's going well. Wednesday, we meet with the food service workers. That's going well. Thursday, we have our third mediation with the teachers, the certified professionals contract. So that's kind of what we got going on this week. Let me just take a quick look at next week. With the holiday, we're not meeting. We do have some ed tech negotiations the following week, the 12th and the 14th of July. So everything else is going really well.
Other subcommittee reports, Ms. Eames?
I've been attending the curriculum planning meetings. We finished up the ELA plans for this year and planned into the next 2 years today. And tomorrow, the social studies group will be meeting all day. Similarly, we will be planning out the next 2 years. But it's been a very enlightening for me series of meetings, and I think very productive for the school. And I look forward to the implementation.
Mr. Beauparlant, you have something or not?
No, Ms. Ames covered it excellently. Thank you.
I'm going to ask Bill to jump in here again. He's got his running shoes on. As far as facilities is concerned, we do have the Johnson Controls presentation on the 11th, I believe, is our next meeting. And I unfortunately missed a Zoom meeting that seemed to move interminably last week, and I was unable to listen to it. So I'll let Bill maybe fill us in a little bit on where that went.
So this is going to be a similar presentation to what Member Scott talked about for the city. We did have a meeting set with Johnson Controls last week, and with the Longley situation, Josh Bro and I were kind of pulled away, so we had to keep rescheduling on Bruce. So we have a meeting coming up Wednesday that we will look at some of those recommendations, and then on July 6th, we'll have them here to present what they have for the energy savings.
Yeah, I think it's the 11th.
The 11th, yeah, what did I say, the 7th?
You said the 6th, and I believe
All right.
they'll be
I
here
was
on the
making
11th.
updates.
On the 11th, that's fine. No, that's fine, just so no one's expecting it, so. And other than that, on facilities, I think we touched on a few things in a meeting, but JCI, I think, is the critical path one at this point. We did talk a little bit about some issues with Dingley, but those are longer term discussions, so. Other subcommittees? No?
No, I'll just say that I have nothing to update for finance or the 6 through 8 concept.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jen. School committee community announcements. Anyone? Ms. Bode?
Thank you. I just wanted to put out there that it was brought to my attention that there was a GoFundMe set up for the Longley Elementary School cleanup. And I just want to make it clear that that is not a Lewiston Public School related thing. And I would caution people to donate to that. Oh yeah, not to donate to it. What did I just say? I'm sorry. Yes, please don't donate to that. It is not affiliated with us. And I'm not, I would just beware. That's all. Thank you.
Can I add to that for a moment? I was made aware of it by a couple members of the committee. So I looked into it a little. We out of my office were not aware of it. I do think it was a sincere gesture. And then the following day, did receive a message from someone who was trying to coordinate the effort and had asked for me to call them. But I, as you know, have had some travel, so I've yet to make contact with them. I think it was a sincere gesture. I just, it wasn't something we were aware of.
Just on a community announcement, I just want to remind everybody that the Liberty Festival will be happening on Monday, and there will be several music that I think there's 3 different musicians that are going to be playing at Veterans Park, as well as fireworks at 9:30, and there'll be food trucks and all sorts of events for the 4th of July.
Ms. Whitlaw?
I just saw on Facebook today that Chef Karen is opening up a second Cheesy Skillet location in the Topsom Fair Mall. So I thought that was kind of exciting news. I think that obviously he's retiring, but he's not really retiring. And so that's exciting news for him.
And I think the only other community announcement I'd have is, I don't know if any of you have come to the city from the Auburn side and seen the big Lewiston sign. It's there. It started off sort of with the end and it's moved the other way, but it's complete now and it's pretty visible. So that was I think that's gonna, hopefully, that stays pristine, so we can enjoy it.
If I might add, I do believe that Neocraft will be making an offer from what I've heard for local artists that might want to paint it. So it doesn't end up graffiti written, but actually with art on the letters. And that's why they were kept the white. But I have yet to hear when that might be coming to fruition.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we can hope. Anything else for community announcements? Seeing none, like to enter into executive session. Whoop. I'm sorry, future items. I'm sorry. Misheard.
Can I make a motion for a 5-minute recess before executive session?
Yes, we will.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, yes. Ms. Scott.
Thank you. So I did have a community member, as well as I believe Megan heard from this community member as well. We were both kind of tagged in a private message about the possibility of having electric buses. This gentleman is actively involved in this process for the state and reached out to see if we wanted to have a discussion about that. I didn't know if that was something that we would want to put on the agenda. And the reason I'm bringing it up is that this is for a grant to get electric buses up to $375,000 per bus, with also another $20,000 for the chargers, facility upgrades for charging, and can apply for up to 25 buses. The only issue, and the reason I'm bringing it up today, is that the deadline for this is August 19th. So I thought if this was something that you might be interested, we'd probably want to talk about it sooner. And I understand that we contract our buses through Hudson, but I did ensure this community member that I would bring this up if this was something that we wanted to discuss or not. Thank you.
I think it's worth a look. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that could create some contract issues because of where we stand with Hudson. We're rather unique, I think, in the state as far as the size of the district and not owning our buses. Most districts do. Was there restrictions as to whether or not a private entity could apply for those grants?
There is an opportunity that if there is a contractor involved, that they could be the authorized agent to claim the grant, but that would have to be further upon with that discussion. And there is quite a fact sheet that I got sent to me from the Maine Department of Education that has a lot of information on this. So I'll forward that to you and to you, Jake, so that you guys can take a look at that. And like I said, this is August 19th, the deadline on this. So if we're going to do anything, I think we should do it maybe sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I'll take a look. Thank you.
Thanks.
So would you like that to be a future agenda item for the meeting of the 11th? Hopefully we can include that. Ms. Bowden?
Thank you. So this is something that I actually kind of brought up with Jake at a meeting on Tuesday. I think maybe he has something in the works, but I wanted to put it out there as a future agenda item. I'd love to discuss the option of bringing back midterms and finals to the high school, specifically for like honors, advanced classes of kids who are on a pathway to go to college. I think it's important that they're taking those tests and preparing to go to school somewhere other than Lewiston, where those tests happen. So I'd like to have that discussion.
Okay, so noted. Ms. Scott?
Just thought of one more thing on that. That reminded me of something else. I'd like to see the Restorative Justice Committee brought back and some work being started on that and looking at what we're doing with some of our students that have been expelled and how we're going to offer education to them, or those that need different resources. I'd like to see that coming back and having those discussions again. Sorry, Megan, I just thought of it. Bruce.
Ms. Parks.
Do you mean the Dropout Prevention Committee? Yes, okay. Just, I meant to send that to you, the information to you the other night, and I forgot, so I'm glad you reminded me.
Is that two names for the same committee?
No, the Dropout Prevention Committee is the state level committee that we're required to have, and I had started working with Tyler on creating whoever will, there's a list of required people that have to be participating, and we had started working on that, but with him leaving and it being summer, I don't think we're gonna make much progress on that over summer, but Linda and I had talked about it the other night, because one of the tasks that committee is tasked with is ensuring that the district has appropriate resources and services for students who might be expelled or at risk of dropping out and things like that. And with the amount of expulsions that we've had over the last 6 months, we were talking about how it would be appropriate to find alternative resources for them in our district, and that would be one avenue to get there.
Anything else? Okay, now I'll drop down to item number 22, to enter into executive session to discuss negotiations of the superintendent, to enter into an executive session on a legal matter in accordance with MRSA 4056E, to enter an executive session on legal matter in accordance with MRSA 4056E, and to enter into an executive session to discuss a hiring process in accordance with MRSA 4056A. We will and we'll do all of those, and then based on the proceedings that we've been doing lately, I would say that well, I guess I would poll the committee to want to know if you want to come back, or if you just want to, most of these executive sessions do not end up in an actual vote. So if you want to, we can just call it what it is. It'd be the end of the published, of the broadcast. And we would not be coming back after that into a public session. Ms. Bowden.
Yeah, thank you. So are you saying that items 23, 24, 25, there isn't going to be a vote? I'm just confused because it says come back to possibly vote.
I know what it says, but we've been, I mean, as far as coming back to just take those votes and then to adjourn, I don't know that we need to come back into the broadcast piece of this.
And
I mean,
I just thought every vote had to be public. Maybe I'm. Oh, okay.
The vote should be in the public record, but
gotcha.
not
Just not
necessarily
back
in the
on.
broadcast.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah,
It would be
so
in
I'll
the-
make a motion to go into executive session then.
It'd be in the minutes.
Mr. Superintendent.
I was just gonna say it will be in the minutes.
I will second that motion.
So we have a motion by Ms. Bowden and seconded by Ms. Hurd. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll take a vote in favor. That is unanimous, and we will take a 5-minute break while we break away from the broadcast. Hopefully, we do not lose the superintendent in the process. And